evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on YouTube as well as on X and on Instagram. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. It is fantastic to be with you on a Wednesday. You know, we have done, in the time that I was in Florida, we did a couple of, post big game reactions during the playoffs that was uploaded on Wednesdays, but I have not done a live show on Wednesday in 4 months. So I'm very excited to be back. We got a ton of NBA playoffs. We can have a team go to the finals tonight. Oklahoma City has an opportunity to close out the Minnesota Timberwolves tonight. They are 8.5-point favorites in Game 5 at home. Really the biggest home game, arguably, in Thunder history. Get to them and why they remind me a lot, not in terms of upside, but in terms of how their roster is constructed, to a very famous team out of Chicago in the 1990s. Get to their comps to the Bulls in about 10 to 15 minutes. Also touch on some more on Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. He is not a Steeler. He's going to be, much to my chagrin as a Steelers fan. But Terry Bradshaw, greatest quarterback in Steelers history, had something to say about the fact that the Steelers are interested in Rodgers. Has a very similar take to what I have as it relates to not just being mad at Aaron, but is mad at the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. Get into that. Shams Charania, the lead insider in the NBA, says this could be the craziest offseason ever in NBA history. And Shams doesn't go just saying stuff unless he knows stuff. And this is the guy who broke the Luka trade, for crying out loud. Touch on that at the end of today's show. I think Caitlin Clark officially has her new rival. It is Paige Bueckers of the Dallas Wings. Get to that later on today's show. Very excited to touch on all of this because I'm telling you, this is there is an element of Paige's game that I find incredibly easy to root for. And also, I think could be a good contrast, not contrast from Caitlin, but almost a playoff of Caitlin when these two could face off. Getting to her at the end of today's show. But first, it appears I'm going to be wrong about the Eastern Conference Finals. I had Knicks in 7. That still could happen if they pull off something that only 13 teams in NBA history have ever pulled off, which is coming back from a 3-1 deficit in a best-of-7 series. But as of right now, Pacers lead 3-1. They won this game 130-121. And the story of this game and the story really of these Eastern Conference playoffs has been my man, Tyrese Haliburton, a guy who was voted, according to a poll in The Athletic, voted by players, a small group of players, but nonetheless, the most overrated player in the NBA. Well, the most overrated player in the NBA just put up this stat line in Game 4, which has never been put up in NBA history. For those that are listening to the podcast, 32 points, 15 assists, 12 rebounds, 4 steals, 0 turnovers. He is the first player, see right down there, in NBA history to record that very stat line. So again, Tyrese literally did something that has never been done before. I almost think he has become underrated to a certain degree because you have folks on, I'm not going to call anybody out because it's been multiple on national television that still are hesitant to give him that superstar title. Now again, I don't think the title of superstar or greatest I've ever seen or anything that involves anything of that magnitude should be just thrown around flippantly. And superstar does tend to get thrown around more flippantly than it should be. My question is this. If Tyrese Haliburton is not a superstar, define what a superstar is. Because my definition of one, I actually had this conversation about a month ago with my man Mike Guido. Shout out to Mike, co-founder of this network and the host of the Bi-Coastal Baseball podcast, when he was basically like, okay, what is a superstar? And let's list them. And my mindset was, okay, is this a guy that I can build a championship contender around? I know is going to be available. I know is consistent. I know he's going to show up when the lights are the brightest. I do not consider Joel Embiid a superstar. First of all, Joel Embiid's never gone to a conference finals. Tyrese has been to 2 in the last back-to-back seasons. He barely even played in the first one with the Pacers were at least competitive in a sweep, if that's a thing. But I don't consider Joel Embiid a superstar. We're flirting with, I'm not sure at this point, all-time great, but at this point, I'm not certain Kevin Durant is a superstar. In 2025, can I build a title contender around the strengths of Kevin Durant? I don't think you can. If KD's your number 2, holy crap, here you come, right? There's teams that are looking to potentially acquire Kevin Durant. There's been some Knicks rumors. I don't think they have the assets to get him, but Brunson, KD, whoa, watch out. Tyrese Haliburton is that, and then some. He is a different kind of superstar. It's kind of like what I've said about Steph Curry when there's been this, he's not a real point guard. He doesn't average 8-9 assists like the Magics or the Stocktons of the world. No, but there's a different way to be a point guard because Steph Curry does handle the ball. He just so happens to be the greatest in the history of the world at doing something, shoot the basketball. Tyrese Haliburton is the best. Certainly, if you want to talk just old school, by the book point guards, he's the best in that regard. But I think it's really interesting where the 32 points he scored, he's got a funky looking jumper. He always has, even going back to his college days at Iowa State. I remember his first couple of years in Sacramento. I'm like, who the heck is this kid? He's got potential. Didn't necessarily see this coming, but my goodness. Funky looking jumper, but it's got a good handle, out off the charts basketball IQ, sets up open teammates. And again, a lot of this is because Indiana is so well built around him, because you have, let's not forget Pascal Siakam, who delivered another outstanding performance, gave you, I think it was 37-39 in game 2, gives you 30 in game 4. Pascal Siakam, yeah, there you go. 30 points, 11 of 21 for the field, 3 for 4 from three-point range. You have guys like Obi Toppin and Andrew Nembhard. Miles Turner is arguably the best shot blocker in basketball. You have a high up-tempo team that fits around Tyrese Haliburton, who ironically is not even the highest scorer in his own team. It's Siakam. Haliburton's like an 18.9 assist guy in the regular season, but steps his game up a new level come playoff time. I've called him throughout these playoffs, really starting with that game 2 buzzer beater to beat Cleveland, which I thought the Pacers were going to upset Cleveland from the jump, but that kind of, I think in the minds of a lot of people, sort of kind of sealed it, where I'm like, oh, that's the clutchest player in basketball. Listen, Brunson, to his credit, Jalen Brunson, who's had a rough series as it pertains to clutch time. Brunson played pretty well last night. He gave you, I think, 31 points. 31 points in this matchup. But in the clutch hasn't been quite what he's been in the regular season or even the previous 2 rounds. Tyrese Haliburton, chance to tie the game or to win the game this season. He's 12 of 14. That's unheard of in the NBA. So I think when you consider that, when he considers off-the-charts basketball IQ, how the team is built around him, again, the definition of a superstar. Are you the best player on the team? Siakam may be their leading scorer. Obviously, Haliburton's their best player. And can those other guys suit the strengths of said superstar player? Yes. Okay. That's a superstar. And the Pacers are 1 win away from the NBA Finals. And, it's funny. I'm hearing a lot of backlash toward Brunson and Towns. Listen, to me, Brunson, the bulk of any sort of flack he should get from the series, if it goes on to end as soon as tomorrow night or on Saturday in game 6 in Indiana, any flack Brunson should get if his play continues shouldn't be for his overall performance. Brunson has been good in the series. It's been late in games he hasn't been. He airballed a jumper. I think it was in game 2. I know he missed one badly in game 1. He missed a game winner or a game winner in game 1, game tire in game 2, or maybe they were both game tying shots. Either way, struggles on the clutch. Haliburton has not. And the Towns fit. People have kind of gone back and forth about that. The fact that the Knicks are like minus 24 when Towns and Brunson are on the floor. I get that. I think there's also an element of, hey, I don't think the Knicks' problem is necessarily a talent thing. I think it's a style of play thing. Listen, they wouldn't have gotten the Eastern Conference Finals if they weren't talented. They wouldn't have gotten the Eastern Conference Finals if they didn't have good wing players. This is why we thought they could beat Boston before the season. We didn't think they beat Boston before the series, but they ended up doing it, is because they have athletic wings like Anunoby and Bridges, who's the defensive sort of mastermind for the Knicks on that end. Towns can give you what can give you on that end and can give you 25 to 30 on the offensive end, and we know who Brunson is. I think you have to start asking questions about Tibbs. And listen, I'll say this and have this on the record. It's not just in the vein of pick integrity, which I believe to my core. Like, once you make a pick, gosh darn it, you freaking stick with it. You die with it. You give good analysis, but you stick with your pick. That's who you picked. It's not even just for that. I don't think the Knicks are dead necessarily, because all 4 games have been down to the wire. Now someone could combat that and say, yeah, but the Pacers have been one of the better clutch teams in these playoffs. Do you think they're just going to blow 3 straight clutch games? Because we could very well see that happening if it were to go the distance to go 7. You think the Pacers are going to blow 3 straight? That's where I have a hard time seeing the Knicks win this series. But because the margins have been so thin, like, it's funny. I can see the Pacers wrapping this up in 5, or I can see the Knicks taking this to a decisive game 7 next Monday night. Like, it's that tight of a series where it's, man, if Haliburton doesn't make that shot and the Reggie Miller choke sign, all of it at the end of game 1 in regulation, what does the series look like? We'll never know. But listen, this is, unless the Pacers just collapse, which I think to a degree is, all 3-1 comebacks require a certain level of collapse from the other side. it's just hard to see that from Indiana. I'm not counting the Knicks out because the games have been so close and because the Knicks have been the comeback kids of these playoffs, along with Indiana also as well. I understand all of that, but listen, it's unless the Pacers collapse, I have a hard time not putting Tyrese Haliburton as a superstar. I just do. I understand the pieces around him work, and Carlisle is a championship coach. I understand all of it, but we never saw this team, or at least most didn't see this as a team that could make the finals. It was like, it's Boston or it's Cleveland. And maybe there were some people in the Knicks corner. That was it. So kudos to the Indiana Pacers, who are going to slay Giannis in the first round, even though they were the better team, take out the champs in round 2 when the majority of that series, Tatum was healthy, and then one went away from taking out the favored Knicks to get to the finals. And I've got to say, I'll transition to Oklahoma City in just a moment. They can give Oklahoma City some problems. OKC would be the better team. I think would clearly be the Vegas favorites. Because of, and OKC is a great half-court defense, but because the Indiana Pacers like to push it, could we see almost like a Dallas Mavericks, ironically with the same coach, Rick Carlisle, could we see a Dallas Mavericks Miami Heat type of situation in 2011? Maybe. It's not off the board. I think anyone that would say the Pacers have no chance to win the finals, should that be the matchup that we indeed get, I don't think they've been paying close enough attention to the Pacers. That is a very for-real basketball team. And shout out to Tyrese Haliburton. That was unbelievable. The guy who has and again, by the way, another definition of a superstar in my mind, you find a way to impact the game even if your shot's not falling. Now, Tyrese's shot was falling last night and has been really all series long. But even if he's like, even the Cleveland game, I'll have to go back and look. How many points did Tyrese score in that game too? I should have prepared for this in advance. How many points did Tyrese score in that game too against Cleveland? Because I remember it being kind of low in the one where he hit the buzzer beater and they made that last minute comeback. Okay, here. Okay, yeah, it was 7 for 11, but he only took 11 shots, right? Like he's not necessarily a volume shooter. Doesn't have to be a volume shooter to make an impact, but there have been games where he hasn't really given you much offensively. Still finds a way to impact the games, get his teammates involved, because that is a high-powered offensive, machine that the Pacers have going right now. So shout out to Tyrese Haliburton, a most overrated player in the league. You can make a case at this point, might be the most underrated. Might be the other side of the pendulum. We'll see how the Pacers continue to progress these playoffs. Again, I struggle. Well, the next show will be on Friday. Next Carving Up will be on Friday after Game 5. I'll be honest. Like, again, I picked the Knicks in 7, so that is still on the board. Like, again, this is how close the series has been. I could literally see the Pacers just sweeping the Madison Square Garden this whole series, going 3-0. That's kind of what they've done all playoffs. Like, understandably, in this series, or I guess, in the previous series, they didn't have home court against Cleveland. They did in the first round, but they take the first 2, kind of let their guard down game 3, and win the next 2 to close it out. That's been the story of the first 2 rounds for the Pacers. Could it be, in this case, going to the Garden? Wouldn't that be something? And that's been something else, too, and then we'll transition to Oklahoma City. That's been something that's fascinating for the Knicks. They're 3-5 at home in the playoffs. Like, that's been kind of weird. Like, they dropped game 2 and 5 against Detroit. They dropped game 3 to Boston. Was that game? Yeah, game 3 to Boston. And then they dropped the first 2 in this series to Indiana. So I remember I've talked about the last few years, the Celtics have been kind of a mediocre home team in the playoffs. That's kind of been the story of the Knicks, at least this year. So we'll see it continues to progress. All right, transitioning now to the Western Conference Finals, which I think are going to end tonight. Minnesota Timberwolves, Oklahoma City Thunder. Game 5 tips off in about 2.5 hours. Thunder are an 8.5-point favorite in this game. So listen, I think Minnesota missed their best opportunity to win the series, or at least to get back into the series. If it's 2-2 going back to Oklahoma City, hey, it's anyone's game at that point. It's best of 3 series. Thunder have home court, but it would show maybe a step in the right direction future-wise for the Timberwolves, where they went down 3-0 in the conference finals, and Edwards was kind of, he admitted he was kind of out of gas by game 2, game 3 of that series when they lost to the Mavs. And then this year, conditioning doesn't seem to be a problem for Ant. Aggressiveness has been. And Julius Randle, who was just, listen, I gave Julius Randle his flowers, and rightfully so. He said by far the best playoffs of his career, but that was, even for quote-unquote bad playoff Julius, that was awful in that Game 4 performance, in a game where the Timberwolves gave you like 64 off the bench against Oklahoma City, but their 2 best offensive players couldn't get the job done. On the Oklahoma City side, though, quick recap of Game 4, and then we'll sort of go into why Oklahoma City reminds me of a past dynasty. Because, listen, I'm not saying they're going to be a dynasty. They could be. And we got a million picks. Their team's young. They got a great coach, great GM. Like, the pieces are there. I'm certainly not willing to call a team a future dynasty when they haven't even gotten the first title yet. So let's let these playoffs play out. They certainly have got a great opportunity to do it this year, where it's, you see what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander did. And folks think I'm a Shai hater. That couldn't be further from the truth. First of all, as a dude, I think Shai's a good dude. I thought he had a great MVP speech with his wife and his kid. It was great. And as a basketball player, he is supremely gifted, can get to his spot any point in the floor, mid-range, fadeaway, can get to the rim at will for a guy his size, great finisher at the rim. There's a reason he shot over 50% from the field, average 33 a game. Like, again, respect to Jokic in the historic year he had, SGA would have gotten my vote for MVP. My criticism has not been how many times he gets to the line, it's how he gets to the line. That's, to me, because people throw out Michael Jordan and LeBron and Kobe and their MVP seasons average more free throws. That's not the point. Was Bron throwing his body, perpendicular to the ground, or Kobe or Michael doing that, literally manipulating officials to get calls seemingly every time down the floor when they do get fouled, i.e. James Harden, who's also a league MVP for the record? Not the way Shai does it. Now, Harden, I felt like was more flagrant because he would throw his head up. I mean, he had whiplash every time he went to the rim. SGA looks like he's getting hit by a car every time he's driving to the basket, gets Gobert or Nas Reed or somebody, or Julius Randle. And so, or really any defender that he faces. So that's the part that I've said Oklahoma City is the only team left. I'm kind of a neutral, now that my Dubs are gone in the second round after the Steph injury, I'm kind of neutral at this point. I don't really care who wins the title. Oklahoma City was the one team where I'm like, I'm not going to be over the moon if they win the championship because of SGA's style play when it relates to the foul baiting. And so, again, if he removes it, even if you take that out of his game, it's not like we're Harden where he was almost reliant on that to be successful. SGA's not. So I think that's going to be something that I hope to see him eliminate from his game at least next season. What I really want to talk about with Oklahoma City, though, because you've heard the dynasty talk, because this series is over. The Timberwolves have a 0% chance to come back. They're not coming back from 3-1. I think it ends tonight. Is not just that folks see this as a dynasty or a team that this Thunder team is like, oh, they're almost like a foregone conclusion to win the title at this point, given who's left. Knicks, I'll tell you, if they face the Knicks, I'd probably take Thunder in 5, to be honest with you. If it's Pacers, it's not a go-either-way series, but is there a path for Indiana to win it? Absolutely. Against Oklahoma City's, transition defense, potentially. Because Oklahoma City is unbelievable in the half court. Best defense by far in the NBA in that regard. One of the best defenses we've seen in years, frankly. It's the comps that I see from this Oklahoma City team to the 1990 Chicago Bulls. Now, for the record, I am 21 years old. I was not alive for that dynasty. But listen, I am a basketball historian as much as a guy my age can be when it comes to basketball play before I was alive. And I appreciate the dynasties of years past and the players and the teams from years past. How this team is constructed, I'm not saying, the Thunder are going to win 6 of the next 8 championships and define basketball culture for the next 15 years. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in terms of roster construction, they remind me a lot of that team. Obviously, SGA, Jordan. 2 supremely gifted shooting guards. Jordan, 5-time MVP. Many believe the greatest of all time. SGA just won his first MVP. He's 26 years old. The sky's the limit for what this guy has the potential to accomplish. Their games are very different, but also very similar. Neither really use the three-point shot. SGA is a little bit better from outside, but that's in large part because the NBA as a whole, because of Steph, just is a three-point shooting league nowadays. But the turnaround, the fadeaway, it really doesn't matter how good of defense you play on that. They're still going to find a way to get to their spot. Both get to the rim at will. Jordan was certainly more of a vertical player than SGA. SGA is not going to posterize anybody. Jordan, that was kind of defined his game in large part. But superstar shooting guard, give you 30 a night, all of it. SGA, Michael Jordan. That second guy, now there's a 2-3 inch gap in terms of height and a big gap in terms of length, but the number 2 guy, the Robin to the Batman. Scottie Pippen with the Bulls, Jalen Williams with the Thunder. Can give you, Jalen Williams is the better scorer, but Scottie Pippen certainly is an excellent defensive player. Jalen Williams is solid on that end as well. Just kind of the Johnny on the spot. You can count on them in big games, like durable, all of it. I also think Chet Holmgren, who's kind of that third guy. We think, who's the third guy for the Bulls? Dennis Rodman. I don't think the Thunder had the Dennis Rodman. You could say Lou Dort, but to me, Lou Dort is more, I wrote this down. Lou Dort to me is, because Caruso to me is Ron Harper. Lou Dort to me is kind of like a point guard version without all of the drama that came with Rodman, and far more skilled offensively, Rodman. Lou Dort can knock threes down from the outside, and he is going to pester the living hell out of you on the defensive end. He's not the defender Rodman was, but he plays somewhat of a similar role based on how the modern NBA is played. Draymond's kind of a last of that Rodman breed in the NBA today. Chet Holmgren, Tony Kukoc, right? Big, long, tall. Now, Kukoc was much bigger than Chet Holmgren. Chet came in the league like thin as ice. Like, I mean, unbelievable. Like, the guy has put on weight, has put on muscle over the course of the last couple of years. I think will continue to do so. But can shoot from the perimeter, is a good sort of, now, Chet is ascending as opposed to Kukoc, was what he was, the best European player at that point. But just big, tall, white, slender frame to a degree, could shoot from the perimeter, all of it. Caruso, Ron Harper, I already mentioned it. Good offensively, outstanding defensively, kind of slows everything down to a certain degree. Hartenstein's Luke Longley. Like, I think there's a comparison. I think Isaiah Joe is probably the best comparison to Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr, who, to this day, highest three-point percentage in NBA history. Shout out to my head coach of my Warriors, Coach Kerr. Isaiah Joe's kind of that guy, that spot-up shooter off the bench for the Thunder. Is that the reason I bring all of this up is not just certainly not to do with what I think the media really wants to do with Anthony Edwards, where it's, he kind of plays like Jordan. We like the swagger. We like all of it. You need to be Michael Jordan, Mr. Anthony Edwards. And I think that's unfair expectations for him to anybody. Hey, we want you to be the greatest or second greatest player in the history of basketball. So I'm certainly not going to do that comparing these Thunder to the 98 Bulls or the 1990s Bulls. I use 98 as the example of that last dance team. It's that if Oklahoma City does go on to win the championship, and they're certainly a heavy favorite to do so at this point, it's a copycat league in the NBA. A lot of teams tried to recreate what the Warriors did in the mid-2010s, bleeding into the 2020s, obviously, with that 22 title, where it's, hey, let's get a superstar perimeter scorer. Bigs don't really matter that much, and we're just gonna space and shoot a million threes, which was a flawed way of looking at it because the Warriors were not just a three-point shooting team, as Charles Barkley and some would like to for you to believe. They'd lock you down the defensive end with Draymond, Clay, Iguodala, all of it. And so, but I think this is going to be a copycat league. I think you could see teams look at Oklahoma City's model and say, okay, got to get our MVP player, perimeter scorer. We understand that. Not a lot of SGAs out there, so that's going to be hard to do. But get a great point guard, shooting guard type of guy, can give us 30 a night, and then just stack it with two-way players, which, frankly, I think other teams have been trying to do. I think that's what Boston did last year, where Tatum's a superstar, Brown's the co-star, and we're just going to get a bunch of two-way guys. We're going to get Drew Holiday. We're going to get Porzingis. That's the type of team that we want to be. And so I think that's what Oklahoma City is in the process of right now. What's scary for the future is how many draft picks they have for the future. I mean, that's why it's on the board. Listen, SGA is going to get a ginormous extension this summer. There's no question about that. Oklahoma City's kind of the player we're not talking about, or the team, rather, we're not talking about, that could get Giannis. Like, they've got the picks. They could package Jalen Williams. And now you got SGA, Giannis, and Antetokounmpo competing for multiple titles over the next 5, 6, 7 years. That's a little terrifying. I'll mention something about Oklahoma City in 2 topics from now, because Shams Charania was on McAfee yesterday, and he was saying that, hey, this could be the craziest offseason in NBA history. Now, Shams obviously knows way more than you, I, and everybody put together. I have a theory on why he said that. So stay tuned for that in about 20 minutes from now. But we'll go to break. Appreciate everybody tuning in on YouTube, X, and Instagram. Feel free to chime in the comment section. We'd love to hear your thoughts on everything going on in the world of sports, as well as whatever I'm talking about. Get to Aaron Rodgers. Second straight show we're talking about him and the Steelers. They have yet to come together. They have commitment issues. And Terry Bradshaw has something to say about it. We'll get to that in just a minute. You wait till you hear what Terry had to say. It's pretty funny. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. We appreciate everybody stopping by on this Wednesday. Transition to the NFL. Second straight show that my Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers are involved in the topic on Carving It Up. Not because the stalemate is, stalemate's probably the wrong way to put it. Not just because the lack of commitment on both sides has extended basically 4 months now, if you want to go back to the end of the season, when the Steelers season ended and the Jets season ended a week before that, the regular season. Terry Bradshaw, greatest quarterback in Steelers history, had some thoughts. We know Terry is not afraid to share his opinions. That's why he's been great on Fox with, to me, the best pregame, halftime, postgame crew on television. Let's respect everybody else, but I think Terry and Strahan and Jimmy Johnson, who just retired. Shout out to Jimmy and Gronk's on that show. I think they all do Howie Long. I think they all do an outstanding job. Kurt Menefee is the host. Terry's not afraid to share what he thinks about any topic in the NFL, and he was on radio recently, and this is what he had to say about Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. Take a listen.
That is just, to me, is a joke. What are you going to bring him in for 1 year? Are you kidding me? I mean,
that's not the Steelers' way, right?
No, man, that guy needs to stay in California and go somewhere and chew on bark and whisper to the gods out there.
I'm sorry, Terry, man. Chewing on bark. That's obviously he's referring to Aaron's let's call it unconventional offseason practices, which is Aaron's personal business. He's free to do that. The problem is when it interferes with a commitment to a football team that is, for reasons that Terry, and I think most of Steelers Nation has no idea of, that becomes a problem. So, first of all, Terry and Aaron have a beef that goes back years. Terry was probably the most critical of anybody of Aaron when there was a whole, I think sort of when this was talked about in the book that Ian O'Connor wrote about Aaron Rodgers. He actually interviewed Aaron for that book. I could not recommend it more. It's an outstanding book. But one of the things that was brought up was that's kind of, I feel like when the public, certainly the media, when their mood sort of turned on Aaron was when the whole vaccination, I'm immunized thing happened, where he said he was immunized. People assume he's vaccinated. Midseason, he had COVID. We remember how all that went down. Terry was as critical as anybody of Aaron at that particular moment in time. So I don't imagine that there's a whole lot of love lost there. And Terry is the greatest quarterback in Steelers history, is like, oh, this guy's going to wear the helmet. Don't care much for that. The thing that I am amazed by, and that Terry is amazed by, is not just the Aaron off-field stuff, not just that the Steelers, and I talked about this on Monday, that they're so obsessed with this whole non-losing season. Like let me just say this real quick. They do realize that's not actually like a thing that other teams care about, right? Like they do realize that, like, that's not the standard in Baltimore. You know, the team that's kind of run the AFC North for the last decade or so, the team that's got the two of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL, Lamar and Burrow. That's not like really, they don't really care about that. Oh, 9 wins, 10 wins. Hey, met our quota, guys. Other teams really don't care about that. That's kind of just like a Mike Tomlin thing that he cares about, and his most ardent defenders seem to just worship at the altar of is the 9-win, 10-win season and getting clocked in the first round of the playoffs. For reasons I'm not entirely sure, but hey, weird flex, but knock yourself out with that. It's that Terry Bradshaw brings up a great point. The Steelers, listen, I thought they were a really good roster last year. I still think they're a solid roster this year, even with the losses. Dan Moore, Najee Harris, all of it. George Pickens, which I think was basically they swapped George Pickens for DK Metcalf. The picks were even tight, all of it. That was an upgrade in my mind, but whatever. This roster, unless you had an A-plus tier 1 level quarterback like a Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, I don't think this is a tight. This goes without saying. Unless you have one of those guys, this is not a championship contender in the AFC, which is always stacked, which always has the best quarterbacks and has for really my entire life, it seems like. There was a time where the Steelers were in that group with Big Ben. So why are you getting Aaron? Because Aaron, there was a point in time for majority of his career, Aaron was tier 1. Aaron has been a 4-time MVP. Aaron he's the only quarterback in NFL history with 500 touchdowns and less than 200 picks. It's one of the greatest ever. That goes without saying. I heard someone talk about the other day how he might not be top 10. Listen, I've been as critical as anybody of Aaron Rodgers. That is an absolute, no doubt, top 10 quarterback in the history of the game. No questions asked. I think the second most gifted QB I've ever seen in my life to Mahomes. So with all of that said, he's not that player anymore. And for the millionth time, we'll show you this graphic. Since 2022, Aaron Rodgers, 56 touchdowns, 23 picks. So again, decent touchdown to INT ratio, but only completes 63% of his throws, 223 pass yards per game, pass rating of 90, which ain't that good. He's 8 games under 500. That's not very good at all. 0 playoff wins since 2020, 0 Pro Bowls since 2021. And in that midst, he suffered the most brutal injury an athlete can suffer, an Achilles tear. Oh, and by the way, he's like the oldest player in the NFL. That's not like a guy that's going to lead you to Super Bowl hopes, which I don't think the Steelers are delusional enough to think, hey, this could fix it. What they're doing is, okay, we don't want to have an embarrassing quarterback room of Mason Rudolph, Skylar Thompson, and Will Howard, so this just gives us credibility. And what does credibility give you in the NFL? Well, it gives you 8, 9, 10 wins, and you're in the mix, and you're in the playoff hunt, and anytime they show those graphics, you're like, in the wild card, the last wild card team, or you're one of those like 5 teams they show on the far right column that are fighting for that last wild card spot. And maybe you get it, maybe you don't. If you do, you get clocked in round 1. If you don't, too bad. You got a mid first round pick, and you can't rebuild your team ever. That's what Terry Bradshaw is talking about. That is why, and just to add to the Aaron Rodgers part of it, we know the off the field drama. That's been the case. It really his whole career, but particularly the last half decade or so, where it's never enough for this guy, even if you give him a brilliant offensive coach, Matt LaFleur, great weapons, a solid defense in what at the time wasn't a very good division. He still could not perform very well in the postseason. That's been the story of his career outside of, or really post 2010. It's the fact, and I did the research on this, because the post 2022 numbers, if you've actually watched Aaron, aren't that shocking. Aaron's time with the Jets, we knew was bad, but so have a lot of quarterbacks with the Jets. I've often joked on the show that the New York Jets is the place where all young quarterbacks' dreams go to die. Apparently, it's all quarterbacks' dreams because Aaron's not exactly young by quarterback standards. We know the Jets have the longest playoff appearance drought in the NFL. They have not been since 2010. So 14 seasons, they have not been to the NFL postseason. So from 2011 to, 2024 and counting. 14 seasons. They've had 6 quarterbacks in that span, Aaron being the most recent, that have started 15 or more games. Aaron has been the worst one. We can show you the numbers. Now, none of these win percentages are exactly impressive. Ryan Fitzpatrick won 46% of his games. Zach Wilson won 38% of his games. Geno Smith won 36% of his games. Josh McCown won 35% of his games. Sam Darnold, who at one point his last year with the Jets, the team started 0-13, won 34% of his games. Aaron Rodgers won 33% of his games with the Jets. That includes the Achilles tear game where he only played 4 snaps. He gets credit for that win because he was the starting quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, among starting quarterbacks, like longtime starters for the Jets, 15 starts or more, has been the worst Jets quarterback throughout this playoff drought. Freaking Josh McCown won more than this guy. Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was known more for his great beard, his Harvard education, and playing for half the NFL, won well more, from a percentage standpoint, way more games than Aaron Rodgers. Geno Smith, that was a low point of his career with the Jets. Higher percentage of his wins than Aaron Rodgers. Sam Darnold was viewed as one of the biggest busts of the last decade with the Jets prior to, obviously, the great year he had in Minnesota, and now he's in Seattle now. Won a higher percentage of his games than Aaron Rodgers. Zach Wilson, again, massive bust. The understudy to Rodgers, who obviously became the starter for the last year he was with the Jets because of the Aaron injury, won a higher percentage than Rodgers. And that's the guy? Listen, you would think, I'm not saying, listen, the expectations for the Jets last season I found to be as delusional as it got. The fact that they were favored over the darn Josh Allen-led Bills to win the division was asinine. You would think Aaron would be better than those guys, than journeymen, than draft busts, than guys who are on their last leg, really only there to be quarterbacks to mentor the younger generation of guys, i.e. Josh McCown. Won a lower percent of his games with those guys with arguably better offensive players. He had Breece Hall and Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. And he couldn't make it work. Coach got fired. Offensive coordinator got promoted because of him, and he was fighting a horrible OC and Nathaniel Hackett, who got demoted again. It was a mess. So even by Jet standards, he was the worst guy. And that's who the Steelers are waiting. According to Jeremy Fowler, and I'm sorry, I don't think this was Fowler. I think this was Schefter, Adam Schefter, reported yesterday. They'll wait till September 7th, which happens to be opening day against Aaron's former team, the Jets, in week 1. So Schefter's like, hey, according to what Schefter's been told, they will literally wait until opening day. No OTAs, no training camp, no preseason, a team he's never played for, and they'll kowtow to him to the very bitter end. So Terry's outrage, and by the way, anyone that doesn't think Terry Bradshaw, that his opinion doesn't hold weight in Pittsburgh, I would hope so. This is the Packers had the first of the modern NFL era. Modern NFL is really post-merger. Oh, let's do that this way. Post-merger, the Steelers had the first dynasty in the NFL. Post-merger, post-1970 merger. Terry Bradshaw won 4 Super Bowls in the 1970s with one of the greatest teams ever assembled, those 70 Steelers. He understands, if nothing else, I know he's old school, I get it. He knows the Pittsburgh Steelers culture. He knows the Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin culture. No BS, football first. This is what we're about. Listen, if Aaron was still prime Rodgers, first of all, the team wouldn't be getting rid of him, because even with all the BS that he had in Green Bay at the end, he was still winning MVPs. You're not going to trade that guy. You're not going to move on from him. It was the second that Aaron became an average quarterback, they couldn't wait to get rid of him. But even still, if he were on the market, I wouldn't love waiting for Aaron. I'd be annoyed as hell if that were the case. But if I'm getting 40 touchdowns, 5 picks, and an MVP finish, you have to take him at that point. You're getting the worst Jets starting quarterback of the last 15 years. And you're just letting him dictate every single move that you make this offseason. You're making Mason Rudolph's job harder. You are, by the day, undercutting the so-called standard that Mike Tomlin has allegedly set in that organization. And shout out to Terry Bradshaw for calling it out, because it's nonsense that they're even waiting for this guy. Listen, I've said from the jump, if they don't like any of the quarterbacks in this draft, and I was a proponent of drafting Shedeur Sanders, especially after he continued to fall. I think that was a big mistake not drafting Shedeur. But if they were like, hey, we like the prospects next year and what's going to be a much better quarterback draft more than Shedeur, okay, fine. Their scouts know more than me. At that point, Mason's the best quarterback on your roster. Will Howard, hey, maybe even see what Will Howard's guy. He was a 6th-round pick. I wasn't overly impressed with what I saw from him at Ohio State, given what he had around him. But sure, he was a national champion. Give him a shot. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with starting Mason to week 10 and starting Will Howard from week 11 on. And what you'll get out of that is 5-6 wins, and finally, you can bottom out enough to actually address, the most important position in the history of team sports, quarterback, and do it with a high upside prospect. Instead, they are addicted to mediocrity. And addicted, apparently, so much so, they'll wait for a guy who's not even that good anymore and is the biggest distraction in the National Football League. What standard? Kudos to Terry Bradshaw for calling it out. He wasn't just calling Aaron Rodgers out, who he has a long-standing beef with. He's calling out his franchise that has seemingly abandoned the Steeler way, if you will. And it's unacceptable. I'm amazed that this has gone on as long as it has. Truly amazed. Now, maybe Terry has so much weight that, and this has gone on so long that we're post-Memorial Day and Aaron is still not a Steeler, that, hey, this is too much. Cam Hayward, the most respected voice in that locker room, Walter Payton Man of the Year winner, like the definition of what you want a Pittsburgh Steeler to be, basically said, you want to be a Steeler or not? You're a Steeler or you're not, in that interview about a month or two ago. Well, he's still not a Steeler. And you got guys out there busting their behinds in the practice field. I get it's OTAs. It's not like full-blown training camp and pads. I understand it. And it's not mandatory, but the guys that miss, it's notable. It's talked about. It's a part of segments on shows like this. After getting ready for the season, and who's not there? Going on a podcast tour, as he always does. And Aaron, by the way, if Aaron wants to retire and do that, feel free. He enjoys going on these shows. He enjoys going on Rogan or going on a couple of Barstool shows. I got a problem with that. Aaron is interesting. I've said, like, the downside of Aaron retiring for my show would be, well, we don't get the drama of Aaron Rodgers. That's like 3 or 4 less carving up the context segment I have for the football season. I got to look elsewhere. It's unbelievable that they're kowtowing this guy. It really, really is. And what makes it worse is if they don't land Rodgers, if he retires, or if they finally, figure out that this guy's been swindling them, they decide to go in the different direction, that they're probably going to trade for Kirk Cousins, who's on one of the worst contracts in the NFL. It's unbelievable. Transferred back to the NBA because Shams Charania was on the Pat McAfee show. He goes on there often. And Shams is the premier insider of the NBA. He famously, I think that the high mark of Shams' career would probably be this February when he broke the Luka Doncic trade, when I was actually thinking about that yesterday, how just take yourself back to that day early. Was it February 1st, 2nd? I can't remember what day it was. I think it was early wee hours of February 2nd. I think it was Groundhog Day. And just how, flummoxed we all were when we saw. I remember it came across my phone. I'm like, yeah, Shams got hacked. Like, there's no way, because there have been no rumors of Luka getting traded. The Lakers were playing really well at that point. And it keeps coming out by multiple sources. And Shams goes on ESPN's like, guys, I didn't get hacked. This is real. It still remains the most shocking transaction I've ever seen in my life. Honest to God. So with that in mind, Shams was on McAfee, and he said, we were not going to use the audio for the show, but he said, and I quote, "This is the most, I think, anticipation team executives have had over an offseason. I think this offseason might be the most craziest ever." End quote. That is what Shams said. So, just point blank, gonna be some wild bleep that happens over the course of it could be as immediate as after the finals, really like mid to late June into, I guess, the first couple weeks of July. Ain't no telling what's gonna happen. So Giannis, we know, is the biggest domino, and there was a report recently that Giannis, he didn't come out and say it, but that he's committed to stay in Milwaukee and building a championship contender. Another report said that Doc Rivers being there might entice Giannis to stay, which I don't know if I fully believe that. I didn't know Giannis and Doc were that close. Doc has the longest leash, has gotten the longest leash of a championship I've ever seen in any sport in my life off that 08 Celtics title. But regardless, I feel like I've said, I'm not saying Giannis will be dealt this offseason, because I actually think there's a chance he actually starts next year as a Buck, but gets dealt before the deadline, similar to Luka, in very different fashion, but similar to Luka. I think Shams might actually be talking about Kevin Durant, who, because of the Giannis news that happened right after the Bucks season ended, that, hey, he's open to other options. And we're talking about teams like Houston. What will they get? Will they give up Şengün to get him? And I've been a proponent of, I think the Spurs are going to get Giannis. I just mentioned in my second segment, the Thunder have the assets to get Giannis. Like, oh, here we go. What if Shams, this is just a theory, what if Shams, who has more inside information than anyone, thinks that the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to pursue a reunion with Kevin Durant? KD is 36 years old. He'll be 37 at the start of next season. He's going into, I guess that's going to be year 19. My gosh, I can't believe that. And it's still, KD's still giving you a 27-9 amazing efficiency. Like, that's just who Kevin Durant is. Because of his age, as great as he still is, he is going to be 37 going into year 19. Is it on the board that the Thunder maybe would not have to give up Jalen Williams? That they could just go, hey, we could give you like Hartenstein, Caruso, and then like a bunch of our picks. Because at this point for Phoenix, who might even look to deal Booker, I think I read that Booker might be staying in Phoenix, at least for the short term. Windhorst said today, KD is like, he said there's a 98% chance KD is not going to be a Sun. That feels kind of guaranteed at this point. We know all the assets Oklahoma City have. they don't have to give up all of them to get Kevin Durant. And if you're the Phoenix Suns, I don't know, Jalen Williams, Booker, that's kind of a weird, they kind of play similar games to a degree. Like, that doesn't really fit. We just need to tear this whole thing down, get a bunch of draft picks, and just totally restart. The owner, Ishbia, has, listen, new owner syndrome is a real thing. We saw it with Prokhorov with the Nets, with the idiotic moves he made there, which is like, we're just going to win now, make a million trades. If it works on 2K, it works in real life, and it obviously blew up in his face, and it really helped create a Boston Celtics 2024 title because of it. Matt Ishbia has done some of the same with the Suns. I thought it's all started with the Bradley Beal trade, which I thought was just, I said at the time was an awful move. I was in the minority. That's proven to be, the case that it was a terrible move. He's been awful. I mean, he's firing coach. He's just throwing Ish at the wall and see if it sticks. Ish is throwing Ish at you get what I'm saying. Get a bunch of draft picks, restart. I think it's on the board that's what Shams is referring to, not necessarily Giannis. Because I don't know if Giannis necessarily knows what he wants to do next. Like, he's hinted at stuff. I know a lot of my fellow fans in Dub Nation were getting excited. Giannis was in a tech conference in San Francisco. And KD has investments in Silicon Valley too, and he went to Brooklyn. Like, and the Warriors do not have the ass. As much as I would just be over the moon if the Warriors landed Giannis, it would guarantee a championship. They don't have the assets to get Giannis. They just don't. So I don't know if Giannis knows what he wants to do next. So I don't think that's what Shams is talking about. I think he thinks, based on what he's hearing, the Thunder may go back and get Kevin Durant. Now, I don't know how KD would feel. Like, it does feel to a degree kind of hinging on whether OKC wins the title. Now, people will unfortunately equate that to him joining Golden State when it felt like the whole basketball world hated his guts, which I've always said the Warriors did not win the title that season. And what was Kevin Durant going to do? Stay with Russell Westbrook, the most under-reliable late-game point guard in the sport, and go to Steph Curry? Yeah, I think I'd go there too. But all of that being considered, it'll all get meshed together like, oh, KD had to join another super team. I think at this point, KD has kind of gone into I don't really give a crap what anybody has to say at this point. Like, people might disagree and say, well, you're sponsored by on Twitter. I think KD has gotten to a point where his life, it's like, I like hooping. I crap talk fans on the internet, put them in their place. I play video games. I smoke a little weed. Like, I'm just chilling, man. If I get to play for contender, great. If I don't, not that KD's not a competitor and like doesn't care if Phoenix was a disaster this season. I think KD cared. I think it bothered him. There's a reason he's not going to be a Sun next year. But it's not wrecking his world the way that I think it would others. So I think, I'm telling you, and by the way, I have the list of free agents. If I can pull this up here, I had the list of free agents on the board for this upcoming NBA offseason. Like, LeBron's the best free agent. He's going to stay with the Lakers. Shams reported that he believes LeBron's going to opt into his $52 million option. Fred VanVleet has a team option in Houston. My guess is they'll decline that. Kyrie's a free agent. Harden, Middleton, Julius Randle, John Collins, Brook Lopez, Clint Capella. We can go on down the list. Bruce Brown, Miles Turner. There was also a report today that the Bulls are looking to deal Nikola Vucevic, which they reportedly were talking to my Warriors about doing right before the deadline. I'd actually love that for the Warriors. You get Steph, Draymond, Butler, and Vucevic. That's a good, for some combo. So we'll see how we continue to progress. But I'm telling you, I think that's on the board. Because OKC would probably have to give up almost all of their draft pick assets to get Giannis Antetokounmpo, which, by the way, if that opportunity presents itself, they will. They wouldn't have to for KD because obviously A, he's not as good as Giannis now, and B, he's older. But it's still great. And it would make you, I think, at that point, the overwhelming favorite to win the 2026 title. We'll see how it progresses. My man, Grady Edwards. It's been too long, my man. He says, I wonder how the Pacers going up 3-1 affects LeBron's legacy. Talking about Kevin Durant, he ought to go back to, let me make this bigger. I cannot see this. He ought to go back to OKC. It would be a healing experience for him. I know he's highly regarded still by joining the Warriors and winning 2 chips, but deep down, I think KD, let me pull up the second comment, thinks he cheated himself by joining the Warriors. He certainly He had an opportunity to go back, and he said no. I mean, I had talked about on my show that my sources had said that the Warriors and that the Suns were like had a deal in place. Like Kuminga was involved, all of it. And Katie told Marcus Thompson, yeah, I'm not going back. I don't know if it's because of any ill will towards Steve Kerr. I don't know if it's just too fresh. The disrespect that he felt had been levied his way, because even at the time where some perceived to be better than Steph got more love because Steph was drafted there. Heck, Clay and Draymond got more love, even though he was clearly better than them because they were drafted there. I don't know if cheating himself is the wrong way to put it, but I certainly don't think he regrets going there, because he probably doesn't have any championships if he doesn't go to Golden State. But I do think it's what if I'd stayed in Oklahoma City? What if, let's say the Thunder had gone out in round 2 in 2017 and Westbrook had a brutal second round series, the way he had a brutal end of the Western Conference Finals when they blew that 3-1 lead to the Warriors. And KD and the Thunder were just like, we can't. Westbrook's is gonna generate a lot of interest. We can get maybe a superstar in return for Russell. I do think KD does think, man, what if I had stayed in Oklahoma City? Not necessarily I regret joining the Warriors. What if I had stayed as a member of the Thunder? I totally agree with you here, Grady. And there's no way KD should go to Dallas. I keep saying all the stuff about that. Dallas is not close. KD should just go back for the sake of going back regardless if OKC wins it all. And I think, listen, the Dallas stuff, really the main reason people point to that is, well, Kyrie Irving. The ties with Kyrie, but Kyrie, I'm not so sure he's going to play a game next season. If he does, it'll be into the regular season. AD has injury history. Now they're going to get Cooper Flagg. So, like, does that kind of complicate things? Because Flagg is obviously the best prospect. Dallas's future is really weird, and it didn't have to be that way. That's the kind of the tragic thing for Mavs fans, is like they just dealt the second best player in franchise history for no reason in particular. Grady, if not OKC, maybe Boston is a good fit, and maybe make some of those salaries work to trade. That team in Boston is expensive and is going to get more expensive because the second apron is going to come into the fray. I think it's fascinating. I talked about this when the Celtics put up the team for sale last summer after they won the title. It's okay. We're going to pay Tatum, we'd already paid Brown, pay, Drew Holiday, Porzingis, and then we're going to sell the team. And so we don't have to deal with the second apron stuff. And with the Tatum injury, now that Tatum is out for all of next year, we assume that does make it a little murky. And so what would you give up in that deal? Probably Holiday. Okay. So let's think about this. I need to see if I can make that trade work. Like if there's like a trade website where it makes the salaries add up. Drew Holiday, I think, would have to be a part of that deal. And at that point, I think Phoenix buys out his contract. Or not buys out his contract, but kind of like, because people forget, the Bucks did not trade Drew Holiday to the Celtics. The Bucks traded him to the Blazers. And then he got traded from Portland to Boston. Or did the Phoenix Suns do a similar thing where it's like, we're going to keep Drew Holiday and take the highest bidder and get more assets? That's on the board as well. I'm speaking of Boston, I've seen a lot of mock trades involving my Warriors trading for Kristaps Porzingis. I think that would be a disastrous move. And it has nothing to do with Porzingis, how Porzingis would fit with the Warriors. I think it fits great for the Warriors. A stretch 5, shot blocker, pick and roll. He's be a great fit. Not only can Kristaps not stay healthy, this virus thing that he's had the last 2 months of the season, where it was get to a point where he was playing like 12 minutes in big playoff games. Like that's Boston, I think, is going to try and deal in this offseason. I'm not so sure how many takers are going to be on that, because these NBA execs know a lot more than we do as fans. That's a weird situation that I don't think the Warriors want any part of. I think there's a lot of teams, even contending teams, teams that think that they can get to the conference finals or the NBA finals. I don't know if they want to mess with the Porzingis health situation. And nothing but prayers and well wishes his way. That's an odd situation. Like, what's the medical condition? Is it treatable? All like that's Porzingis' personal information, obviously. I don't think he'll have a lot of suitors. Let's put it that way. Drew Holiday will. I know he's getting older. I think Drew was actually in the same draft class as Steph, Harden, and DeRozan, the 09 class, which, I mean, looking back, was pretty darn strong. He's still a great perimeter defender. I think he's the best. I think Tony Allen and Drew Holiday are the best guard defenders of the 21st century. Tony Allen's my number one. That guy gave Kobe problems. That guy gave KD and Steph problems on the perimeter. Drew Holiday be my number 2. He'll have takers, great veteran presence, can shoot the 3, can still defend. I don't know. That's Boston is a team to watch this offseason. Like, do they all in's the wrong way to put it because they do have a great roster as is. But with the Tatum injury, did they just say, hey, next year's just not our year. We'll get Tatum back in 2026 and move forward. But we do have to move off some of these salaries and then rebuild it around him and Brown. Boston will be an interesting team to watch this offseason, what their strategy is going to be. But KD, I could see it. Boston has the assets to do it. And as you mentioned, Grady, the salaries work. We'll see. All right, to the WNBA now. And it's a shame that in my short little hiatus moving back from Florida to Tennessee, I wasn't able to talk about some of the early season WNBA headlines. But I want to touch on something that I don't think enough people are talking about today, or a player that not enough people, at least in the national media, in WNBA circles they are, but not in the national media, are talking about today. Her name's Paige Bueckers. Now, I think most people know who she is. Superstar at UConn, played 4 years, ended her career winning a national championship, which basically all the UConn greats do. Paige Bueckers, Sue Bird, Taurasi, Brianna Stewart. We know the list. Well, she just had an outstanding performance last night in her first win as a pro with the Dallas Wings. She was the first pick, of course. Dropped 21 points, which is a career high. 7 assists, 5 rebounds, was 8 for 10. She is the second rookie in WNBA history and the first in 20 years to go 21, 7, and 5 on 80% shooting. Second rookie in WNBA history not to do that. I was surprised that, maybe not surprised Caitlin Clark didn't do that because Caitlin wouldn't shoot the efficiency that Paige did because she would take more shots. I think we've got a new rival for Caitlin Clark. So I know... So the Caitlin Clark Angel Reese thing has been a hot button issue on a number of fronts. On the who's better, which I think most people agree who's the better player, but the one won a ring, one didn't, but one accomplished more. And then there's obviously the racial component to it, and all of the I think non-basketball stuff that neither Caitlin or Angel even made a big deal, but grifters on both sides made a big deal because of it. I love Angel Reese. I'm pulling for Angel Reese. I've rooted for Angel Reese. I defended her in the nonsense that she faced after that whole John Cena national championship fiasco 2 years ago. I thought it was nonsense. Still think it was nonsense. She's got to make layups. Like, it was bad last year. It's gotten worse. I mean, Angel Reese this season, I saw a stat today that she's the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 500 points and 500 rebounds. Like that's I don't want to take credit away from her. That's impressive. But when you're shooting 30% as a forward who's a back to the basket player, that's a problem. What's Angel Reese shooting from the field this season? She's averaging 14 rebounds a game, 10 points, and she is shooting from the field 31%. That's not great. And Caitlin, given that Caitlin is 5-1 in her last 6 matchups against Reese, going back to college, Iowa, and LSU, given the fact that she's the significantly better player, it's not that Angel Reese still can't be a major face of the WNBA. More people know who Angel Reese is than who Brianna Stewart is. And that's in large part due to branding, due to college basketball, all of it. I think this is going to be Caitlin Clark's rival. Not Angel Reese, Paige Bueckers. Because this goes back to when both were freshmen in the 2020-21 season. Like, this goes back to when there were barely butts and seats at arenas because of COVID. Freshman campaign, Paige wins the player of the year. And Caitlin was no one knew who Caitlin Clark was at that point. She was a solid player at Iowa. And people designated, this kid at UConn, this Paige Bueckers, she's going to be the female version of Steph Curry. She's pulling up from deep. She's got a good handle. She can score at all 3 levels. Oh, my goodness. And then she gets hurt the next year. And you start to see the rise. I remember very well. I think it was was it her sophomore year? I think it was her sophomore year, freshman sophomore year, Caitlin Clark, hitting like a logo buzzer beater. Iowa's got like really dope pink uniforms. I remember Caitlin had like a bomb 3 to win a buzzer beating game at one. And that was kind of the first time I saw Caitlin. I was like, who is this? Like, shot that thing like without hesitation. And then because of Paige's injury and it takes her time to come back, Caitlin wins National Player of the Year. Caitlin's going to the national championship. Caitlin is breaking the all-time scoring record in men's or women's college basketball. She is the torchbearer. She's the one, not a male player. Caitlin Clark is the one to take the mantle from Steph as the best long-distance shooter in the world. And Paige, her UConn Huskies, face off against Caitlin Clark in that Final Four in 2024. Caitlin didn't shoot that well, but Iowa won the game barely. There was like a controversial call at the end. Iowa won. Caitlin, number 1 pick. Caitlin, increase the value of the Indiana Fever from under 100 million to over 300 million. Like her impact financially to the Fever is like LeBron like in Cleveland or Steph like in Golden State. Like this is Jordan like in Chicago. This is rare stuff that she's doing from an economic standpoint, from an on-court standpoint. She was first team All-NBA, All-WNBA as a rookie, all of it. Meanwhile, Paige has been flying under the radar. She wins the national title at UConn, number 1 pick this year with Dallas. I have a hard time believing that there isn't some resentment on the part of Bueckers as the competitor that she is, where she was the next one in line. She was the female Steph Curry. She gets hurt. Now it's this girl at Iowa that gets all that love, adoration, and praise and attention. And I'm at the premier women's college basketball program, or really in general college basketball program over the last quarter century, UConn. And I'm not getting half that love. Okay, I can do what you can do. I'm doing things as a rookie early in my career you didn't do. I think it's an interesting matchup. When did Dallas? So Caitlin unfortunately suffered I think it was a groin strain and is out the next 2 weeks. When do Dallas and Indiana face off? Okay, June 27th, day before my birthday. That'll be fun. Caitlin should be back by that point. That'll be fun. Keep your eye out. June 27th, Wings Fever, Caitlin, Paige Bueckers. I'm just saying it right now. That's an interesting rivalry potentially. Watch out. That's all I'll say. I just checked IG. If John Rivera is still watching Fan Perspective Podcast, I am so sorry, John. I didn't check. See, when I go live, a little behind the curtain here. When I go live on this StreamYard app that I used to go on YouTube and on X and on Instagram, I've just recently started doing Instagram, and it's open on a different tab on my computer. So anyone that comments on IG, it does not show up in the comment section on StreamYard. So I just saw that John mentioned a couple of times about during my KD segment. He said he's gone. KD's 1,000% gone. Just about to say that, giving up less to get KD than Greek Freak. So I feel bad about not answering John, so I apologize. But yeah, so listen, I'm telling you, it's not getting a lot of attention now. Angel Reese is the more popular player. But when it comes to I've always said this about rivalries, there's got to be a push and pull. Like, this is why whenever people were talking about 7, 8 years, or even let's use a modern example. Let's use today. Man, Chiefs, Bills, what a one-sided affair. The Chiefs are 4-0 against the Bills. No quarterback has ever been 4-0 against another quarterback in the postseason ever, aside from Mahomes versus Josh Allen. And Josh is awesome. The Bills could win the Super Bowl as soon as next year. Who knows? Be great for their fan base. One of the best fan bases in sports. That's not a rivalry. If the Bills win next year, if they face off, Bills finally give the hump, bam, we got a rivalry. We got a back and forth. We certainly don't have a back and forth when it comes to play between Caitlin and Angel. And as of late, Caitlin's team has won more, 5-1. I'm telling you, I'm just going to say this in the front end. They're both young, both number 1 picks. One played a prestigious women's college basketball institution. One didn't necessarily. One got the love that the other ended up getting because the first one got hurt. Don't tell me there isn't some resentment there. And the fact that I'm sure Paige feels like, hey, we could have won a national title in 2024 if Iowa hadn't knocked us out. I'm just saying. Very, very fast. And by the way, don't forget about freaking Juju Watkins at USC, who might actually be better than Caitlin Clark. And I'm dead serious when I say that. That kid is, oh my gosh. Hopefully she comes back from the ACL tear. That was a gut punch seeing that during the tournament. But I thought my man Arthur Hurst, who was, and this is the last point I'm making. I've got a comment from Grade. I'll get to that in a second, and then we'll get out of here. But Arthur, who's a great contributor, was on 8 o'clock spot last night. Shout out to Arthur, and has just dominated that show all season long. He made a great point on my show about 2 months ago when we were talking about women's college basketball, or women's basketball in general. He said, if the way it's perceived, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese is the rivalry. He said, if Caitlin is, Larry Bird and Angel Reese is Magic Johnson, just under that context, the comparison that it gets, then Juju Watkins is Michael Jordan. I'm like, whoa, now that's good. Like, both became Bird Magic, all-time greats, we understand. And then Jordan went, he beat Magic in the finals, but that was against a beat-up Lakers team. Never beat a fully healthy Celtics squad. But early in Jordan's career, it's like, he's not winning as much as they are, but he might actually be better than them. And then once he got over the hump, it was over. Juju can do that. She's got that kind of ceiling. So, listen, women's basketball's in good hands. We've known that for a while. Grady, comparing Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen is like comparing Tom Brady to Big Ben. We kick their butt every time in the postseason and pretty much everywhere all around. I would almost go, no, that's disrespectful. I was going to say Brady and Phillip Rivers. That's not fair. Because it bothers me, Grady, when people compare it to Brady and Manning. Like, guys, we're not just talking about the two accomplished. Brady is the GOAT. Manning is on my Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks. But Manning won multiple MVPs when Brady won the titles. And then after that, once Manning finally got over the hump and beat Brady when he came back on them in 2006, I guess that was, when the Colts came back from 21-3 down on New England, then it was a push and pull from Manning and Brady as they went on to set records. That's not to discount Josh Allen, who I've said is one of the most talented QBs I've ever seen. And he got an MVP, which was huge for him. He's got to get Patrick. Like, at some point, the Chiefs, we saw the Chiefs. They're not invincible. There was a point in time where once we got in the playoffs and then once they beat the Buffalo again, there was almost this feeling of inevitability for Kansas City. Like, okay, they just can't be beat. Or invincibility might have been the more invincibility, inevitability. Either one could be applied to Kansas City going into that Super Bowl. And then Philadelphia said, that's funny. We're going to stomp them for 60 minutes. So it can be done. Brady did it twice. Burrow did it. Hurts did it. Mahomes can't be beaten. The Chiefs can't be beaten. So puts a little more heat on Josh. Grady, sooner one of these young college players can lead their teams on a deep postseason run in the WNBA, the better. No question. And I think, listen, Indiana made some good acquisitions this offseason. And the injury to Caitlin obviously potentially takes Caitlin out of the MVP race because of games missed. Like, Asia Wilson is still just unbelievable. But the second Indiana is a legit title contender, then that's going to be a game changer. And it will be interesting if in the next 2 to 3 years, once Indiana does reach that championship contending status, their finals are in October, which is, we know, October. I just have like hearts in my eyes when I think about October. Baseball playoffs, football's midseason, college and NFL, NBA starts back. For you hockey fans, hockey starts back, and you also got the WNBA finals as a part of it. I'm curious what the NFL is the king of television. They will always beat the WNBA because they'll always beat any sport. Would it put a dent? Let's say there's a Thursday night game, which are notoriously terrible. And game 4 of the WNBA finals with Caitlin Clark's opportunity to win a championship is that same night at the same time. I'm just saying, like, she's got that kind of impact. And speaking from a personal level, as a content creator, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Because they were like, what gets views on your channel? I said, like, consistently? And every time I can talk about the Chiefs, for some reason, it like gets more views than my other videos. But NFL gets me views, and Caitlin Clark college football does, and Caitlin Clark. Those consistently get me views, play, feedback, all of it. NFL, college football, Caitlin Clark. So I'm with you, Grady. The second that team's a contender, and maybe going even further down the line, once Paige's Dallas Wings are a contender, now that's fun. That is great for my show and for other shows. And for all of us as fans. We enjoy that stuff. So there you go. All right, that is all the time I have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by. As always, be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on YouTube, as well as on Instagram and on X. Game 5 tonight, I'm calling it on the spot. I think most people feel it's going to go this way. Thunder are going to knock out the T-Wolves, maybe in blowout fashion. They'll be in the NBA Finals come next show on Friday night. And Game 5 in the ECF will have been played as well. I can't see the Knicks going 0-3 at Madison Square Garden in a series. I can't see it. the Knicks stave off elimination, and we'll have a Game 6 at Indiana on Saturday night. That's my prediction. We'll see if it comes to fruition. So Thunder wrap it up tonight. Knicks extend the series. We'll see y'all on Friday. Everybody stay safe out there. God bless y'all. Peace out. And get back soon, Caitlin. Come on. Get back soon. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.